The airport was busy that morning. People hurried through the halls, pulling their bags, checking screens, and standing in long lines. The sound of rolling suitcases and announcements filled the air. Everyone seemed in a rush to reach their planes. In the middle of this busy scene walked an old man. The old man wore plain clothes, and his steps were slow but steady. His face carried lines of age, yet his eyes looked sharp and calm. Some people glanced at him, then turned away, thinking he was just another traveler. There was nothing special about him at first sight, yet something about his presence felt different. He moved without hurry, almost as if time itself could not touch him. When he reached the boarding gate, he stood in line like everyone else. Passengers ahead of him gave their tickets, the officer scanned them, and people walked into the plane. Then came the old man's turn. The officer, a young man in uniform, smiled politely and asked for his ticket. The old man handed it over. The officer scanned it once, then again. A small frown appeared on his face. He checked the system carefully. Then he shook his head. "I am sorry, sir. This ticket is not valid for this flight. You cannot board." The people waiting in line grew impatient. A man behind the old man sighed loudly. A woman with a child looked worried that the delay would make her miss her seat. The old man, however, did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He simply looked at the officer with steady eyes and stood still. The officer expected anger or complaints, but the old man's silence felt heavier than any loud protest. The officer spoke again. "Maybe there is a mistake. Please wait at the side while I call for help." The old man gave a small nod. His calmness unsettled the people around him. A young man in line spoke loudly. "Why stop him? He has a ticket. Let him go in. You are holding up the line," the officer tried to explain. "The system shows this ticket is not allowed. I cannot let him in." The old man finally spoke. His voice was soft, but it carried a weight that made people listen. "It is better that I do not step on this plane." The words surprised many. Some passengers chuckled, thinking he was being dramatic. Others felt uneasy. His tone was not angry, not mocking, but full of certainty, as if he knew something hidden from everyone else. A woman holding her child whispered to her husband, "Why would he say that?" The old man turned his gaze toward her. His eyes were kind, but his words were firm. "Because the sky has a truth today. That machine is not ready for me." The officer frowned and grew nervous. He thought the old man might be superstitious or strange. To be safe, he called for security. 2 guards arrived quickly. They asked the old man to step aside and wait. The old man did not resist. He did not complain. He simply stepped back slowly, folding his hands behind his back. He gave space for others to move forward. His calm presence made some people uneasy, as if he was not just obeying rules but allowing fate to take its path. One by one, passengers boarded the plane. Some shook their heads, thinking the old man was foolish. Others looked back at him with curious eyes. A few even felt a chill, remembering his words. When the final call for boarding was announced, the crowd thinned. The old man stood near the large glass window, watching the plane that now waited on the runway. His lips moved, whispering words no one could hear. Some thought he was praying. Others thought he was only mumbling to himself. The engines of the plane roared to life. The ground trembled slightly from the power. People inside the terminal continued with their lives, but a small group kept their eyes on the old man. His face was calm, but there was something in his eyes, something like sorrow mixed with certainty. The plane began to move slowly toward the runway. The old man did not take his gaze away. The child who had seen him earlier tugged at his mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mama, why is he not scared?" The mother did not know how to answer. She only held her child close. Then, just as the plane turned toward the sky, something unexpected happened. A sound filled the air, and in that moment, everyone who had doubted the old man felt their hearts tremble. The plane moved down the runway, its engines shaking the ground. People inside the terminal watched through the glass as the aircraft picked up speed. Some passengers cheered, happy their journey was beginning. Others leaned back in their seats, closing their eyes. The old man did not move. He stood by the window with his hands behind his back, his eyes following the plane. His calm face was almost unreadable, but those who watched him could see that he already knew something. As the plane lifted into the air, the crowd inside the terminal clapped softly, a habit some travelers kept. The aircraft rose higher, wings steady against the blue morning sky. Everything seemed normal. Then, without warning, the plane trembled. A strange sound echoed from above, sharp and loud. People gasped and pressed their faces to the glass. The engines made a violent roar and smoke burst from one side of the plane. The wings shook as if the sky itself was pushing the aircraft away. Inside the terminal, silence fell. A woman dropped her cup of coffee. A child began to cry. The man who had shouted earlier at the officer now covered his mouth with his hands. The officer at the gate looked shocked. He had no words. His eyes moved quickly between the plane in the air and the old man standing by the window. The old man's face was still calm, but his lips whispered something that no one could hear. "Is it going to fall?" A voice cried out from the waiting area. The plane tilted slightly, smoke still trailing from one engine. The sound of alarms carried faintly through the glass. Passengers inside the plane were probably screaming, though their voices could not be heard. People in the terminal clung to one another, trembling as the sight grew worse. The old man finally spoke, his voice soft but clear. "The sky warned me. This bird was not ready to fly." Those nearby turned to him. Fear filled their faces. Some wanted to question him, but his tone stopped them. His voice was not cruel, not proud. It was simply certain. The plane circled above, trying to turn back. The pilot fought with the controls, struggling to keep it steady. Fire burst for a moment, then smoke thickened. The sky filled with the sound of engines that no longer obeyed. A mother held her child tightly, rocking back and forth. A man knelt and began to pray. The guards who had moved the old man aside earlier now looked at him with wide eyes. They remembered how calmly he had accepted being blocked. They remembered his exact words. The officer who had scanned his ticket whispered, "He knew. He knew this would happen." Another voice rose from the crowd. "Old man, who are you?" "How did you know?" The old man turned from the window. His gaze swept across the faces staring at him. His eyes carried both sorrow and wisdom. "I listened to the silence of the morning. It told me this bird should not take me. Now you see why." The crowd shivered. Some believed him. Some thought he was only lucky. But nobody could deny the truth in front of their eyes. The plane above was struggling, and the old man had spoken of it before it even left the ground. The airport grew tense. Announcements came from the speakers. Voices of staff trying to calm people. Emergency teams rushed toward the runway. Fire trucks lined up in case of disaster. The whole terminal was no longer just a waiting place. It had become a witness to fear. The plane began lowering, trying to return. Its wheels prepared to touch the ground again. Everyone held their breath. The old man kept his eyes steady, following every movement. The landing was rough. The aircraft hit the ground hard. Sparks flew from beneath, and the smoke thickened. People screamed inside the terminal, their hands gripping the glass. Yet somehow the pilot managed to keep control. The plane skidded across the runway, shaking and trembling before it finally stopped. For a long moment, silence covered the entire airport. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The passengers inside the plane were safe, but the fear remained heavy in the air. The officer looked again at the old man. His heart pounded. The man's words rang in his mind. "It is better that I do not step on this plane." Now everyone knew the old man had not spoken out of fear. He had spoken out of knowledge, and that knowledge made every soul in the terminal tremble. The runway was still covered in smoke. Emergency trucks sprayed water on the plane, and staff hurried passengers out through the exits. People inside the terminal pressed their faces against the glass, trying to see. Everyone felt relief that the plane had landed without crashing, but the fear still clung to their hearts. In the middle of this tense silence stood the old man. His calm face had not changed. His eyes followed the rescue teams outside, yet his posture was steady, like someone who had expected this ending from the start. The officer who had blocked him earlier stepped closer. His hands trembled as he spoke. "Sir, how did you know this would happen? You warned us before the plane left the ground. How could you know?" The old man looked at him, then at the crowd gathering around. His voice was quiet, but every person heard it clearly. The sky spoke. I listened. This bird was not safe for me, and the sky made it clear. A man shouted from the back, "What do you mean the sky spoke? Are you some kind of pilot? An engineer? How could you predict this?" The old man shook his head slowly. "I am none of those. I am only a traveler who has lived long and watched the world carefully. Machines have voices too. They whisper to those who know how to hear. That machine cried before it left the ground." People exchanged uneasy glances. Some thought he was wise. Others thought he was mad. Yet none of them could deny what had just happened. The plane had nearly fallen from the sky and he had refused to board it. A woman carrying her child stepped forward. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. If you had gone inside, would the plane have fallen? The old man looked at her kindly. If I had entered, fate would have walked differently. I was not meant to be inside. That is why the gate refused me. The crowd shivered again. His words sounded like riddles, but they carried truth. Even the guards who had pushed him aside earlier now looked at him with respect, almost fear. One of the guards asked carefully, "Who are you, really? You do not look like an ordinary traveler." The old man smiled faintly. His wrinkled face softened, but his eyes stayed sharp. "I am only an old man who listens to what others ignore. Nothing more." The officer stepped back, confused and shaken. Around them, the crowd grew restless. Some began whispering, some began asking questions. Soon the terminal was filled with voices. "Is he some kind of prophet?" one man whispered. "Maybe he works with the airline," another said. "No," a woman replied. "I saw his eyes." He knew. The noise grew louder until an announcement echoed through the speakers. "Attention. All passengers remain calm. The flight has landed safely. Please wait for further updates." The voices softened, but the eyes of the people still stayed on the old man. It was as if the incident had marked him with mystery. The old man finally turned away from the window. He walked slowly to an empty seat and sat down. His hands rested on his knees and his gaze lowered as though he carried a heavy memory. Some passengers followed him. The woman with the child sat nearby. The officer remained close, unable to walk away. Others stood at a distance but still watched him, curious and unsettled. The officer finally asked again, his voice low. "Sir, do you travel often? Do you always hear these warnings?" The old man looked up. His expression was calm, yet a shadow of sadness crossed his face. "I travel where the sky allows. I listen when it whispers. Sometimes it saves me, sometimes it saves others. Today it saved many." The woman holding her child spoke next. "Then what about tomorrow? Will the sky warn us again?" The old man closed his eyes for a moment. "The sky does not speak every day. It only speaks when it must." His words sank deep into their minds. Nobody dared to laugh at him now. Nobody dared to call him foolish. He had turned a morning flight into a lesson of fear and mystery. Outside, the plane still smoked on the runway. Inside, the passengers waited for answers. But the question that echoed in every heart was the same. Who was this old man, and how could he hear what no one else could? The smell of smoke still drifted faintly into the terminal. Outside, fire trucks rolled back, and the damaged plane stood like a wounded bird on the runway. Passengers who had been inside were led away by rescue teams. Some limped, some cried, but all were shaken. Inside the terminal, people could not take their eyes off the old man. He sat quietly on a metal bench, his back straight, his hands folded together. He looked like an ordinary elder, yet something about his presence kept drawing people closer. The woman with her child stayed near him, while the officer who had blocked his ticket stood close, afraid to leave. Even the guards remained nearby, as if protecting him, though they did not fully understand why. Whispers spread through the terminal. People spoke softly, but their voices carried. He knew about the plane. He said it before it even took off. Maybe he has powers. No, maybe he is just lucky. The old man lifted his head slowly. His calm eyes moved across the crowd. The whispers stopped at once, as though silence obeyed him. Finally, one young man gathered courage and stepped forward. "Old sir, forgive me, but how did you hear the sky?" "Nobody else heard anything. Everyone just saw a normal plane." The old man studied him with a steady gaze. His reply was gentle, yet each word carried weight. "Machines have voices. Nature has voices. The sky carries them, but men run so fast they do not listen. I have spent years learning to be still. That is why I hear what others do not." The young man looked puzzled. "But if you knew, why did you not warn the passengers? Why let them board?" A shadow passed across the old man's face. "Would they have believed me? No. They would have laughed, as many of you laughed when I said it was better for me not to board. Sometimes warning is useless when ears are closed. The truth shows itself only when the moment arrives." The woman with the child held her son closer. She whispered, "But you saved us in the terminal. If you had boarded, maybe it would have been worse." The old man nodded slowly. "That is why the gate refused me. Fate blocks paths for reasons we cannot see. You all may think it was the system or a mistake, but it was the sky placing its hand." The officer's heart pounded. He could still hear the words the old man had spoken before the flight. Now those words echoed like thunder in his memory. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Sir, please tell me one thing. Are more dangers coming? Should we fear the next flights?" The old man's eyes softened, but his reply was careful. "Fear lives in every journey. A wheel can break. A storm can strike. But not every bird will fall. The sky does not always send warnings. Only when the danger cannot be hidden." The officer swallowed hard. Around him, the passengers shifted uneasily. They wanted clear answers, but the old man gave only truths wrapped in mystery. Another man spoke from the back. "If you can hear the sky, then tell us what will happen next. Will another plane be in danger today?" The old man did not answer quickly. He closed his eyes, breathing slowly. The terminal grew silent. Every person waited, their hearts tight with both fear and hope. When he opened his eyes again, his gaze was deep, like a calm ocean hiding storms beneath. "The sky is quiet now," he said softly, "but quiet does not mean safe. Quiet means watchful. Be patient and you will see." The words sent a chill through the crowd. People did not know whether to feel relief or worry. Some pressed their hands together in prayer. Others kept staring at him as if he was not just a man, but something more. Outside, emergency staff continued working around the broken plane. Inside, time seemed to slow. Every movement of the old man held the attention of dozens of eyes. The fear of what had just happened mixed with the mystery of his knowledge. The woman with the child finally spoke again, her voice soft but clear. "Old sir, will you travel again? Or will you wait for the sky to call you?" The old man gave a faint smile. "A traveler does not choose when the journey begins. The sky chooses. I will walk when it is time." The crowd listened, silent once more. His words were simple, but they carried power. Nobody could deny the truth of what they had seen, and nobody could forget the tremble they had felt when the plane had nearly fallen. In that moment, the old man was no longer just a blocked passenger. He was a mystery the whole airport could not ignore. The damaged plane was now empty. Fire crews had cooled the smoke and passengers were guided into a separate hall for care. The terminal where the old man sat grew quieter, but the air was still heavy. People kept their distance from the old man, yet they could not look away from him. He sat calmly as if nothing strange had happened. Soon, footsteps echoed through the hall. A group of airport officials and two men in dark suits entered. Their faces were stern and their eyes quickly found the old man. The officer who had stopped his ticket stood stiff, unsure what would happen next. One of the suited men spoke firmly. "Sir, we need to ask you some questions." The old man did not resist. He only nodded and stood up slowly. His movements were graceful, unhurried. It was as if he had already expected this moment. The woman with the child tried to step forward, but a guard gently stopped her. She whispered, "Please do not harm him. He did nothing wrong." The suited man looked at her but gave no reply. He focused only on the old man. "Come with us." They led him to a quiet office inside the airport. The officer who had denied his boarding followed, his heart unsettled. He wanted to know the truth as much as anyone. Inside the office, the old man was offered a chair. He sat down, folding his hands. Across from him, the officials prepared to question him. The first official leaned forward. "You refused to board. Then the plane nearly crashed. People say you predicted it. How did you know?" The old man's voice was calm, steady, and soft. "I did not refuse. The sky refused me. I only listened." The machine was crying. "You could not hear it, but I could." The second official frowned. "Are you saying you heard something wrong with the plane? Are you a mechanic?" The old man shook his head. "No, I'm only a traveler. But I have walked long years and the world has taught me to listen to what others ignore." The officials exchanged uneasy looks. One whispered to the other, "He speaks in riddles." The officer who had stopped him finally stepped closer. "I believe him. I stood at the gate when he said it. He told me it was better for him not to board. He was certain. His words were not guesswork." The officials turned to him sharply. "You are saying this old man gave a warning before the flight?" The officer nodded quickly. "Yes, he said it clearly." The old man looked at the officer with calm eyes. "I spoke not to warn but to explain. Fate already made its choice. Warning cannot change what is meant to be." The first official grew impatient. "Enough riddles. Who are you really? Where are you from?" The old man gave a faint smile. I am no one special. I am a man who carries stories of the road. The world is my teacher and the sky is my guide. Nothing more. The officials sat back, frustrated. They could not prove he had done anything wrong, yet they could not ignore his strange knowledge. The second official whispered again. If word spreads, people will panic. They will believe this man has powers. Outside the office, passengers still whispered about him. The story of the old man spread like fire through the terminal. Some said he was a prophet. Some said he was an angel in disguise. Others feared he was a curse. Back inside, the officer asked carefully, "Sir, may I ask you something? Did the sky only save you today, or did it save us all?" The old man's eyes grew distant, as if he was remembering something far away. His answer was slow, heavy with meaning. The sky saves not for one or for many. It saves because balance must remain. Today balance was kept. Tomorrow, who knows? The room grew silent. Nobody dared to speak after that. The officials leaned back, troubled by his words. The officer lowered his eyes, unable to understand but unable to doubt. Finally, the first official stood. "You are free to go. We cannot hold you. But know this, old man. People are afraid. They will not forget you." The old man rose calmly. His eyes held no fear, no pride. "Fear is not my gift to them. The truth is, what they do with it is their choice." He walked out of the office slowly, returning to the waiting hall. The crowd saw him and grew silent again. His presence had become heavier, as if he carried the weight of secrets none of them could touch. The tremble of the plane had ended, but a greater tremble now lived inside the hearts of those who had seen the old man. The crowd inside the terminal was restless. Rumors spread quickly. Some said the old man was blessed. Others whispered he was dangerous. Wherever he walked, eyes followed him. Mothers held their children closer. Travelers spoke in hushed tones. And even the guards kept their distance, though they never looked away. The old man, however, showed no fear. He moved with steady steps and sat once more by the wide glass window. Outside, the runway was clear again. Planes landed and departed, yet the memory of smoke and trembling wings lingered in everyone's mind. As he sat, a tall stranger walked toward him. This man was not an officer, not a guard, but someone different. His suit was sharp and his eyes burned with curiosity. He carried the posture of power, the kind of man used to being obeyed. He stopped before the old man and spoke clearly so that the whole hall could hear. "Old traveler, people say you knew the plane would fail. I want to know if your sight is real or if you play with fear." The crowd grew quiet. All heads turned toward the two men. The old man looked up slowly, his eyes calm as always. "Why do you wish to know?" The stranger smiled, but it was a cold smile. "Because if you truly see danger before it comes, then you are valuable. And if you only play tricks, then you are dangerous. I want to test you." The woman with the child gasped softly. The officer stepped forward nervously, but he did not speak. Everyone waited for the old man's answer. The old man's voice was soft yet steady. "The sky does not play games. If you wish to test me, then listen with your heart, not with your pride." The stranger crossed his arms. "Words are easy. Show me something real." He pointed out the window where another plane was preparing to take off. "Tell us now. Will that plane fly safely, or will it fail like the other?" The crowd stirred. Some whispered in fear, some leaned closer, desperate to hear. The old man closed his eyes. He breathed slowly, as though listening to something no one else could hear. A long silence followed. The engines of the waiting plane roared faintly in the background. At last he opened his eyes. "That bird will rise safely," he said. "The sky is gentle with it. Do not fear." The stranger raised an eyebrow. "We will see." The crowd pressed against the glass as the plane rolled forward. The engines grew louder. The aircraft sped down the runway and lifted into the air. For a moment, everyone held their breath. Then the plane rose higher, steady and strong. No smoke, no trembling, only smooth flight into the sky. Gasps filled the hall. Relief swept through the crowd. The stranger's smile faded. He looked at the old man with sharper eyes. "So you guessed right once. But once is not proof." The old man replied calmly. "I do not guess. I listen." The stranger stepped closer, lowering his voice but still loud enough for many to hear. "Then listen again. Tell me, old man, what about me? Do you hear the sky speaking of me?" The hall grew silent once more. The old man studied the stranger carefully. His gaze was deep, almost piercing, yet full of calm. Finally he spoke. "Yes, the sky whispers of you. It says you walk with pride heavy on your shoulders and pride blinds your path. Your steps are strong, but your ears are closed. If you do not change, the fall waiting for you will be harder than any machines." The stranger stiffened. His face turned hard. Murmurs filled the hall. Some nodded, saying the old man spoke truth. Others feared his words would anger the man. The stranger forced a laugh, though it sounded hollow. "So now you speak riddles about me, too. Perhaps you enjoy making people fear." The old man shook his head slowly. "Fear is not from me. Fear is from the truth that people refuse to face." The stranger glared, but he said nothing more. He turned sharply and walked away, his steps echoing against the floor. The crowd remained silent, still caught by the old man's words. Some began to see him not just as a traveler, but as a messenger. Others still feared him, believing no man should speak with such certainty. The officer, who had stood quietly through it all, finally whispered to himself, "If he is right about machines, and even about people, then what else does he know?" The old man sat quietly once more. His eyes returned to the window, watching the sky as if reading messages hidden in the clouds. The hall remained filled with unease, for everyone now understood that the test had not shaken the old man. Instead, it had revealed even more mystery. The airport was quieter now, but the air was heavy with tension. The story of the old man had spread to every corner. People whispered about him in small groups. Travelers looked over their shoulders as they walked past. Even the officers and guards, who had seen many emergencies, felt uneasy. The calmness of the old man was not ordinary. It carried a weight that could not be ignored. The old man sat once again by the window. Outside, planes took off and landed as usual, but the memory of the earlier disaster remained. The tremble in the sky and the smoke from the damaged plane had left a mark on every mind. Passengers still shook slightly at the thought of it. The officer who had first blocked the old man approached him. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. "Sir, I have to ask, will the sky warn us again today?" The old man looked at him, his eyes calm and deep. The sky does not warn lightly. It waits for moments that demand attention. If another warning comes, you will hear it. But do not try to force it. Patience is as important as listening. A small crowd gathered nearby. Everyone leaned in, trying to catch every word. Mothers held children close. Travelers pressed their hands together. The woman with the child who had stayed near him smiled faintly, grateful for his presence. Then, from outside, a loud siren rang. A plane was preparing for takeoff on a distant runway. Its engines were loud and the vibrations carried inside the terminal. The crowd turned toward the window. The old man stood slowly, his movements deliberate. He raised his hand slightly, pointing toward the sky. His voice, calm and commanding, carried clearly. "That bird is strong, but listen. Clouds gather and winds shift. Watch carefully. Do not fear, but do not ignore." The crowd stiffened. The officer asked, "What do you mean?" The old man's eyes scanned the runway. "Machines obey their makers, but the sky is larger than any man. When clouds gather and winds rise, even the strongest can tremble. Pay attention, and you may prevent harm." A woman whispered to her friend, "Do you think he is right? He predicted the first plane's trouble." Her friend nodded. "I do not know. But he is not wrong so far." The plane outside gained speed and lifted off. At first it flew steadily. Then a sudden gust of wind pushed it slightly sideways. The engines roared, and the wings rocked. People gasped. The old man's calm voice rose over the noise. "Steady your hearts. Fear will not help. Watch and learn from the sky." The plane adjusted slowly. The pilot fought against the wind. The passengers inside the terminal held their breath. Sparks from the runway flashed as the landing gear adjusted mid-air. Finally, the plane stabilized, lifted higher, and disappeared into the clouds. The crowd exhaled in relief. Murmurs rose as people realized that the old man had predicted the danger again. His words had guided their attention, their understanding, and their awareness. The officer stepped closer to the old man. "How do you know these things? How can you see danger before it comes?" The old man's eyes softened. "I have walked long roads. I have observed life in all its forms. I have listened when others speak, And I have listened when no one speaks. The sky is not silent. It always speaks to those who wait and listen. The officer nodded slowly, understanding more than he could explain. Others in the crowd whispered to each other, some nodding, some fearful, all respectful. The woman with the child looked at him and asked softly, "Will you always listen for us, sir?" The old man smiled faintly. "I do not choose for others. I only walk my path and listen. But if my path crosses yours, then the sky will speak through me again, and you will hear." The sun rose higher in the sky. Its light fell on the terminal, glinting off glass and steel. The old man remained calm, a quiet figure of wisdom in the midst of human uncertainty. Around him, hearts were lighter yet wiser. The tremble in the sky had passed, but the lesson remained. The old man had shown them that listening, patience, and awareness could protect more than fear ever could. For now, the terminal was calm. But everyone who had seen him knew that the old man carried secrets that the sky alone had entrusted to him. And those who witnessed him would never forget the morning when one blocked passenger became the guardian of the skies. The airport slowly returned to normal. Travelers checked screens, called taxis, and gathered their luggage. Yet the memory of the morning tremble lingered. Everyone who had witnessed the old man's calm knowledge felt a new respect for him, even if they did not fully understand. The old man remained by the window, quiet, watching the planes take off one by one. The officer who had first blocked him approached. His steps were careful, as if each movement mattered. "Sir," the officer said softly, "people will speak of you for a long time. Some will call you strange. Some will call you wise, but I want to thank you. You saved lives." The old man's face softened and he nodded slowly. "I did not save them alone. The sky watches over all. I only listen." A small crowd had gathered near them. Some travelers stayed to see him leave. The woman with her child walked closer, the child looking curious and wide-eyed. "Will you ever board a plane again?" she asked. The old man smiled faintly. "I do not travel unless the sky allows. If it is safe, I will go. If not, I wait. The sky has its own way of guiding paths." The officer looked at the distant runway. Another plane was preparing for takeoff. "And if danger comes again?" he asked. The old man turned his calm eyes toward the runway. "Then the sky will speak again, and those who listen will hear. But danger comes for those who ignore the signs, not for those who observe." The crowd listened, leaning in. Mothers held children. Travelers murmured among themselves, and even the guards who had accompanied him felt the weight of his words. It was as if the old man carried a quiet authority that no uniform, no rule could challenge. The suited man who had tried to test him earlier appeared in the distance. He paused, looking at the old man from afar. There was no anger in his eyes this time, only curiosity and a trace of respect. He turned away slowly, understanding that some knowledge cannot be forced, only observed. The officer whispered to himself, "One man, one warning, and yet he changed the morning for everyone." The old man stood, his hands folded behind him. He looked once more at the sky. The wind carried the faint sound of engines and the sunlight reflected off the plains above. His face was calm, almost peaceful, yet his eyes held the weight of many journeys and many secrets. The woman with the child stepped closer. "Sir, will you walk among us again?" He nodded faintly. "I walk wherever the sky sends me, sometimes among crowds, sometimes in quiet places. Those who see me may not understand, but they will remember." The child looked up at him and asked, softly, "Are you like a guardian?" The old man's smile deepened just slightly. "Perhaps. The sky guides many, but some paths need careful listening. If I walk where the sky leads, then maybe I guard in my own way." The crowd felt a quiet awe. Some whispered thanks, others only stared. For the first time that morning, the terminal felt lighter, filled with the calm that comes after fear is understood. The officer finally spoke aloud, addressing everyone. "Let this remind us, even ordinary travelers may carry extraordinary wisdom. Today, one man listened when others ignored. Today, lives were saved because of him." The old man took a slow step backward and began to walk toward the airport exit. Travelers watched him leave. Nobody spoke. The air seemed to hold a quiet reverence, as if the terminal itself recognized the importance of the moment. Outside, the sun rose higher. Planes flew across the sky, steady and strong. The old man disappeared, among the crowds moving calmly, carrying his secrets in the quiet power of those who listen to what the world whispers. And though people returned to their lives, they never forgot the morning when one blocked passenger became the guardian of the skies, showing that wisdom, patience, and listening could save more than fear ever could. The sky remained vast and mysterious, but for those who had witnessed him, its whispers would never be ignored again.